Hello and welcome to this podcast named Arts and Life with Shuba. As you know, this comes to you from Online School of Drama. And as you also know this, that in this podcast, we introduce you with the people who have huge experience, a lot of work in the field of a particular art form, and maybe it has connection with education or with the life, be it literary art, visual art, or performing art. It can be any art. As you already know, today's guest is Dr. David Allen from Birmingham, England. Before I welcome him on the screen, I want you to introduce with him first a small introduction of Mr. David. Just give me a few seconds. Here we go. A little introduction of Mr. David. Yes, here you can see, I am sure you can see now the slide on the screen. This is Mr. David Allen, writer, theater director, mental of the expert trainer, and founder of Midlands Actors Theatre, Birmingham, England. David Allen is the artistic director of Midland Actors Theatre, Birmingham, England. He runs the Facebook group, The Commission Model of Teaching, and is the convener of the annual Dorothy Heathcote Now International Conference. David has worked with the schools and teacher training institutions to develop mental of the expert in Germany, Portugal, Spain, Poland, Italy, and Turkey. He runs regular courses for Online School of Drama in Mantle of the Expert. And this podcast comes to you from Online School of Drama. Wow. He is the author of numerous books and articles on drama and teaching. His books include Performing Chekhov and Stanislavski for Beginners. Theater productions include Descent by David Calcutt and Sarah Sayeed, The Children. Let me read it again properly. Theater productions include Descent by David Calcutt and Sarah Saeed. Okay. The Children by Edward Bourne and Good Person of Sezuan by Bertolt Brecht. He is currently leading two major projects for young people funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, Dorothy Heathcote Living History Project, and Fellowship with Nature, the Arboretum and Botanical Gardens movement. These projects reflect his interest in drama across the curriculum. Oh, that is David Allen. That too is David Allen. And that is also David Allen. And this is David Allen. And now, let me welcome David Allen. Let me ask him to come in front and be visible on the screen. Hello, David. Welcome to this podcast, Arts and Life with
Hello.
Shuba.
This is also David Allen. Hello. Thank you, Shuba, for inviting me to this event.
Yes, this is also David Allen live on the screen. David, first of all, thank you very much for your time, taking out time for this podcast, accepting the invitation. I'm really happy.
Oh, I'm glad to be
And
here.
my first curiosity is you live in Birmingham, and how would you like to introduce Birmingham to the people like me who has no idea where is it? I mean, it is in England, but what kind of city it is? How would you like to introduce Birmingham to us?
Birmingham is in our second city, which may surprise some people because I think Manchester seems more widely known abroad, but Birmingham is the second largest city. And it's right in the middle of England, which is very convenient in terms of it's not so far from London, but also convenient for going to other parts of the country. It's it the problem for me with Birmingham is simply that it's a city that maybe since the Second World War has been continually reinventing itself and rebuilding itself. So it's very modern. And you know that any building that they create within about 30, 40 years or so, they're going to knock it down and build something new, which means that it's not a city where you have much history around you or sense of history around you. When I go to other cities like Manchester, I'm looking around me with some amazement because I see all these old buildings, which we don't have, not so much anyway. And so,
Hmm.
well, part of the work that I do is very much focused on local history. And I work with a well-known local historian called Professor Carl Chin. And Carl is very immersed in the history of Birmingham and the West Midlands and the Black Country, as we call it. And well, when you go around Birmingham with Carl, it's eye-opening for me because he's pointing out things that I might not have noticed otherwise. But I was born in Birmingham, and there's a lot of the Birmingham's history that I don't know, and I don't know it because we do have this tendency, as I've said, to erase the past. We simply seem to be that the motto of the city is forward. And maybe that's in people's mindsets, or at least the councillors who rule us think all the time in terms of going forward and not about preserving the past and where we've come from. It's a great city for going out and restaurants and so on. But I do wish we had more sense of local history.
Hmm. So you have already spoken a little about your work and you're thinking about Birmingham. But second part of my question would be really what does Birmingham mean to David?
Well, I suppose it's interesting really because I live now just round the corner from the place where I was born.
Ah,
So in my life, I did live in London for a time, but otherwise, really, I've lived in the same area.
hmm.
And the area where I live is on the edge of Birmingham. It's South Birmingham, and just near where Birmingham ends and the countryside starts and the county of Worcestershire starts. And so I feel like I'm facing two ways. And one way is my face is going towards the city centre. So I'm looking towards the city centre. But I'm also aware of what's behind me, this countryside, this other world, this places like Worcester, like Redditch, um, where there's a different sense of place and time and history. And a lot of my work now is not so much in Birmingham. I do quite a lot of work in Worcester now, or in Worcestershire, and so I feel I'm in, and that it's a different world because there's so much history there, and so much sense of a long past, and so I feel it's good a thing. It's a good position to be in, really, because I have this one world which is in more tied or deep sense of the past, and one world in front of me which is this modern, forward-moving city, which is so fast developing and has so many all of the benefits of city life and living in a city. Because I don't think I could be somebody who could live in a village or live in the countryside. I do have to have that sense of being in a big city as well. Best of
Hmm.
both worlds, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting to know that. And David, as we know that you are a writer, you are a theater director, mental of the expert, mental of the expert trainer. and artistic director of Midlands Actor Theatre. What are you in the core? More of what?
Well, you asked me how to describe myself, and I did put writer first. So maybe there's something there that I think of myself maybe as
Uh,
writer first. But I
hmm.
am, I do theatre directing and I do teaching, and I do a lot of my work and time nowadays is in teaching and thinking about education and working through Dorothy Heathcote's ideas and passing those ideas on to other people. Um, and I think one thing that I enjoy, and the fact that I set up Midland Actors Theatre, and that really means that I can do what I want to do. It means that um, I can do these different things. I was an academic for a time, and I still have that as part of me. I do write academic pieces. I do papers at conferences. I direct plays. I can move around in all these different areas, and I'm not confined to one area. So I think I enjoy that.
Okay. So moving from one area to another area, coming back to this and that, and you do it comfortably. Yeah. Okay, good. So let me welcome our viewers at this moment because we just started on time. And if someone has come after the start time, welcome to this podcast named Arts and Life with Shuba. And I want to tell you humbly that you can be part of this by commenting in the chat or asking your questions directly to David. Your questions and comments are welcome. So we have already seen a few people, including this is Hanlo, Vaishali, Pramod Panuli, etc. Thank you for showing your presence, and we know that some more people are there. Good. So, David, I will be asking you different kind of questions, very basic and advanced. Maybe for me they are advanced, but not for you. And I will be using my Kam Chalao English. Kam Chalao is just workable, right? And so David, now, like we just mentioned that you are all this and you are comfortable in working with all this, but did you really start as a writer? When was it that you realized the writer inside you? Can you remember that?
Um, I know that when I was growing up, my father wanted to be a writer, and but he was sort of a frustrated writer, and his ambition was that I would become a writer. But I think he visualized, well, he saw himself possibly as a fiction writer, so thought I might go that way. But I don't write fiction, and I write academic pieces. Um, I think probably one of the big developments was when I was around about 15 or 16. I first encountered Chekhov on the stage.
Oh,
And within a short time, I saw a series of productions by directors such as Jonathan Miller, David Jones, um, Lindsay Anderson. And I was really struck by these productions. And I wrote about them. I was doing a A-level drama and theatre studies, and I wrote a project about these productions that I'd seen. And I was quite bold because I contacted people like Jonathan Miller, who's quite a famous television presenter and director. I contacted them and I got a reply. And that continued when I did my Bachelor of Arts thesis. I wrote again my dissertation about these productions and some others. And then it came to a point around about 1987, I think, that I decided to do a PhD. And talking to the person, Jerry McCarthy, who became my supervisor, he suggested I should write about Chekhov on the British stage, because Chekhov has an interesting history on the British stage. Because to begin with, Chekhov's plays were not understood or accepted at all. And only after a certain time did people really embrace these plays and see them almost as English plays. So it was a question of understanding why people didn't see them as plays to begin with. And as part of my PhD, I went and spent 5 months in Moscow, where I was supposed to be doing research, but I didn't do a lot of research. But I did see life in Soviet Russia just in the last few months before everything changed, because I was there for 5 months. And when I came back, within a few months, Gorbachev was deposed while the coup happened against him, and then Yeltsin rose and took over from him. So, and everything changed from that point. So I was lucky in a way to see this interesting time just before everything changed. But out of that came a PhD, and out of that came a book, Performing Chekhov. And really, it was finishing that book that was kind of the end of my journey with Chekhov. I still really love him as a writer. But I guess that was the first really big, committed piece of writing that I did that went really over many years, from the start of when I wrote something for my A level to completing the PhD, which then became the book Performing Chekhov.
Okay, good. So, you have written book on Chekhov. We will come to that later. But right now, my curiosity is about this term project. And when we see your work, like at the moment you are already running two projects related to Dorothy, Heathcote, and related to Botanical Garden. You are uh, busy with these two projects. So from Indian context of things, how do you get a project? What is the system? What is the process there? And how do you convince people, or you make your proposal and present it to someone, or there is some advertisement and something that all those who are interested to work on this? How does it really work? But this is something which is not common in India. So I would like to know a little more about how it works.
There are certain main sources of funding that we go to. And so the two projects that you mentioned are both going to last about 2 years. And we are working with young people based in different schools in the local area. And they're both funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So this is money that comes from our people buying lottery tickets, and then so much goes to history and heritage projects. So we make an application for funding to the
Okay.
Heritage Fund, and we've been very fortunate. Well, I say fortunate because they have funded us over 4 or 5 different projects now, fairly substantial projects. And I think it's because we've put together ideas which are, it's for me, when I'm putting together a proposal for a project, I'm trying to put together a package that I think will work for me, but will also appeal to the funding bodies. It meets certain of their aims and targets. I mean, one of their interests, for example, is work with young people. And so very much that's what we are doing. We do reach a lot of young people through our projects and get them really involved actively in engaging them with history and heritage. And as I've said, that's an important part of our work, is about local history, local heritage, and mining that and getting people aware of that. We're also at the moment finishing off a play commission. Another source of funding for us is Arts Council, and they have funded us for new play commissions where, well, as we're doing at the moment, we have a team of writers developing an idea for a play from scratch. And we bring in some actors or dancers, choreographer, musician, and we're developing ideas together for a production, not just a play, but the production. And hopefully then we will go on and secure funding again from the Arts Council to do a full production. And I like that way of working because it means I'm very much hands-on and involved in the development of the play from the start. So I feel like I'm almost one of the co-writers on the piece in terms of shaping it or deciding the direction we should be going in. So that's how projects work for me, mostly through those two funding bodies.
So these funding bodies have something to do with government, or they are independent funding bodies?
Their money is from the government, or at least through the lottery, the National Lottery. Both the Arts Council and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, funded by money from the lottery, but they are kind of they are government organizations, but also independent. They have this status where they make their own decisions, and their policies will be affected by the government, but they are independent organizations as well.
Okay, thank you. David, that takes me back to 1980s. And as far as I know, that a lot of TI companies were there in 80s or in the beginning of 90s even, and they were being funded nicely by local government and municipalities or something like that. And what is the scene now? Where have those TI companies gone? Are they still working? Because many of my questions would be as an Indian drama in education practitioner who wants to know the scenario there, because we owe a lot to England. A lot of beginning happened there. So, what is the scene now, actually?
There were a lot of companies, yes, because theatre in education was born in England in the 1960s, I think, at the Belgrade
Yeah,
Theatre, Coventry.
yeah,
And there were many companies. When I was um, studying, teaching at that time, there were a lot of theatre in education companies. What happened was, well, it was an interesting time. These companies, they had an organization which was called the Standing Conference of Young People's Theatre, or SCIPT. And it was a very serious organization. And it had an annual conference, 5 days, I think, where I would go. I went to one or two of these conferences, and there was a seriousness about art and education. There was also quite a strong political tendency within this movement. A number of the leaders in it were Trotskyists. And I remember going to one conference, and the call was that people were standing up and saying, we should stop the conference and we should go to a meeting of the Trade Unions Congress in Brighton, and we should picket the conference and demand a general strike. That didn't happen, by the way, but there was that militancy within the movement. I'm not saying the whole movement was like that, but there was this militancy. In came Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. And what happened within a short space of time was that a lot of these companies, their funding was cut. And I don't really think it was a coincidence. I think there was a shift going on and I think that although it was never stated openly, I think that there was concern that these companies who seemed so political were being funded by the government. And I think there was a move under Margaret Thatcher to end any kind of signs of militancy, of revolutionary activity. There was as of course we know, there was this big fight with the miners. There was an attempt, I think, to change the culture of the country. And so theatre and education companies, many of them were cut, and the whole theatre and education movement didn't exactly die, but now you only have one or two companies that work in that old way, like Big Brum Theatre and Education Company, which is based in Birmingham. The old model of theatre and education has almost disappeared. You do get a lot of companies now who tend to do more, they are driven by trying to create performances that directly meet the teacher's aims in terms of the curriculum. This was never the case with the old style of theatre and education movement, where there was very much the company would decide together what was educationally important for young people to know. And there was some great work produced at that time. But now there's much more, okay, we want to serve the teachers' teaching aims so that we go in with a production that is a set text, for example, that will meet. And I think there's much less depth of work going on in theatre and education in England. I mean, I don't know that I would call Midland Actors Theatre a theatre and education company in that sense, because we don't do what TIE companies did in the past, which was design and produce theatre for young people, which would be going into schools and with accompanying workshops. The work that I do in schools is all based on working sometimes with teachers in role, but much more the kind of drama in education model that I am also helping teachers to develop. For example, Mantle of the Expert. So I'm not sure what the theatre and education scene is in India now, but the whole situation in England is very different to the time you were talking about.
Okay, you have been associated with the Big Brum Theatre Company, and it was very active, I think, in 90s or in the beginning of 21st century in a way. Uh, what is it doing right now? They have shifted to this drama in education thing, or because you have been associated with that, so I just wanted to know.
They're very active. There was a time when some companies have got what they call a kind of core funding from the Arts Council, which means that they're funded on an annual basis. And for a time they lost that, but now they have that core funding again. They are pursuing the same model as before, taking plays on tour around to schools with accompanying workshops. So they are, as I say, one of the few remaining examples of that kind of classical model of theatre in education. What happened was they worked over many years very closely with Edward Bond, who wrote a lot of his new plays for the company. So Edward Bond, if people don't know, he was a writer who emerged in the 1960s with some controversial plays such as Saved. And at a certain point in his career, he ceased to write for or have his plays performed in the British theatre. He was taken up and performed a lot in France. But in England, Edward Bond focused his work mostly with Big Brum. And possibly the company became too closely associated with Edward's name. That's not really my view, but it's possible that the Arts Council might have thought this company is too much about one thing. And Edward Bond himself I don't think after the company's core funding was cut, I don't think Edward wrote for them again. So the company is still working with Chris Cooper, who is a director and writer who worked a lot with Edward Bond, and he's writing plays for them. They're still continuing in work, which is good to see.
In India, we generally do not have drama teachers in schools. I don't have the exact uh, data, but roughly, if there are 100 schools, one, maybe less than one, but maybe one school has a devoted drama teacher. What is the scene in England? I'm talking about school, like primary or higher secondary level.
Well, primary schools tend not to have drama teachers.
Mhm.
It's very rare. I think there's a fear among some teachers about the word drama. They
Yeah.
think that it's a skill that's not within their experience or expertise, and they have some anxieties about it. There's some research that's been done that shows this, and so with primary schools, it tends to be that the drama teacher is brought in for special once a week class. Um, but of course, when you're talking about Mantle of the Expert, you're talking about a way of working that is across the curriculum rather than drama as a separate subject. It's a method that can be used to explore different aspects of the curriculum and bring different aspects of the curriculum together. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a background in drama teaching. There's a school that I work with a lot, Woodrow First School, where 45%, I think, of the teaching is through Mantle of the Expert. And the teachers at that school, I don't think any of them are trained as drama teachers. It's a method that can be used without necessarily having that background as a drama teacher, although I think that it is very much a drama form. Now, in secondary schools, there are drama departments in many of them, but it's a declining subject, I think. Quite a lot of schools are stopping teaching drama. And
Mm.
it is not a subject in the national curriculum. So there's English, there's French, there's history, and so on. But drama is not a subject that has to be taught in schools.
Mhm.
And within these schools, there's a lot of pressure and competition among different subjects for an already crowded timetable. And so I think we've been seeing that drama is being squeezed out of quite a lot of schools. But of course, what tends to happen in secondary schools anyway is there is an emphasis on drama as performance skills, and thinking in terms of theatre as a discrete subject, plays, criticism, lighting, design, and so on. Whereas what I'm doing is using drama, as I've said, across the curriculum. And I prefer to go into these secondary schools and not be working in the drama department, but working in the history department or perhaps the science department. I've also worked in the maths department. We had a teacher once who worked with us to develop Mantle of the Expert in sport. And I'm interested in developing those subjects and different ways of working in those subjects rather than developing drama as a separate subject. And I
Mm.
think that we have to look at it and say, well, I mean, there are people who say we should be fighting for drama as a subject. But well, I have some issues with this, but in any case, I think we should also be fighting for drama across the curriculum. That's what I'm doing.
So, is there a decline in the drama studies related to education? Because in England, we have many universities who provide like drama, masters in drama in education, or theater in education, or applied theater, or play therapy, drama therapy, and so on. So, is there a decline in the offering of these courses, or no, they are there because many international students are coming there?
No, there is a decline.
Oh,
There are uh, universities who have closed their drama departments. The
oh,
University of Wolverhampton, where I used to teach drama, has closed, and other places. And local to me, there's Newman University, and I've been teaching drama there for some time, and that is now closed its drama department. And I think there are certain factors here. And partly it's because I think through COVID, there was less exposure to drama for young people. They didn't experience it
yeah.
because they were working at home
Hmm.
and studying at home. And also, there was such an emphasis from the Conservative government on STEM subjects, on science, on mathematics, and arts were being squeezed out. Creativity was being squeezed out. I think young people were being encouraged to go into careers which were to do with science and not the arts. I think that was really the mindset of our previous Conservative government, was the idea of the arts were a luxury. The arts were really not something that young people should be encouraged to take up. And I think that has shifted now. And we're seeing more emphasis again on creativity and the importance of creativity. And so the place of drama might come back, and the interest in drama might come back. And some of these universities who've closed down not just their drama departments, but their whole performing arts department. So they've closed down the music department and the art department. They might see that things might change again, things might change back, and some of those universities might realize that they were premature in closing their departments down.
It also means the scene in schools is not very good as far as all kinds of arts are concerned. They are not at the core of the curriculum, as you were hinting already, not only drama, but other arts. How are they seen in a school curriculum?
I think, again, part of the problem is the pressure in the curriculum, where teachers feel this pressure anyway, that they've got to cover a lot of information. It's so packed with different topics, and there is so much sense for teachers of, oh, we've got to achieve this. The children, students have got to be able to do this. I've got to fill them with this knowledge so they can pass the exams, so they can get the grades. And that has squeezed creativity out of teaching. And I think that maybe is the idea that the people who run education at the highest levels tend to see teaching in terms of knowledge and facts, and see teachers increasingly as technicians rather than creative people in their own right. Because I guess you can control teachers that way. They a lot of the freedom that I had when I was training as a teacher, I spent a year doing a postgraduate course in teacher training where we were in schools um, only gradually started to move into teaching in schools as the year went on. To begin with, we were in university learning for 5 days a week about how to teach. And teaching is a sophisticated art. Teaching is like, my tutor Dave Davis used to say, it's like brain surgery. You're working on all these young minds. And so I think you really need this thorough grounding and training in what you're doing, in how you're working. And we had that. We had this intense focus on developing ourselves as teachers. Nowadays, in teacher training courses in England, at a university level, they only have a very limited time in the university. I think a total of like 16 or 20 days or something ridiculous like that. They only have a very limited time in university before they have to go out and do the teaching. And when they're out in schools, they've got to be meeting these teaching targets. That's what they're thinking. That's that whole mentality that they get sucked into, because that's the system. The system is telling them, you've got to meet these targets. You've got to get the children up to this level. You've got to teach them all this information. And so they're not really prepared in the same way we were. When I did this postgraduate course, we had this immersion, this deep immersion. By chance, I did a course which was all about Dorothy Heathcote, Dorothy Heathcote's way of working. And before I went to this course, Dorothy Heathcote was not a name that I knew. And it was, of course, an enormous revelation that changed my life. And it was that immersion in Dorothy's work. I mean, it then became a life's work to continue to try to understand it, to learn from it, to develop myself as a teacher, to try to apply these wonderful ideas, these wonderful methods that Dorothy herself created. And I was blessed to know Dorothy and to have her work with us and help us to develop our own projects and work. And I still feel like, in a way, that I'm still being taught by Dorothy. It's like, because I do these Facebook posts every day, I'm continually looking at what she said. People might be a bit taken back by this, but I do say that it's 40 years of knowing and thinking about Dorothy's work, and there's still a lot of the time I think to myself, oh, I get that now. Now I understand, Dorothy, what you were talking about there. I'm still learning. I'm still learning from this enormous, rich resource of knowledge and ideas that Dorothy left us. And I'm still learning from working with you, Shuba, because these courses I do, I'm learning from your students, because in working with them, I find out, I say, oh, yes, now I need to understand this or help them to understand this. It deepens my knowledge. Dorothy always used to say that she learned from working with her students or with children in the school, and I think that as well.
Oh, yes, you always keep on saying that you are still learning. And I think that is the way a teacher or a facilitator keeps growing, I think. And I wanted to ask something related to creativity, but then Dorothy Heathcote's mention has changed my mind. And when was it like you thought? Because today you are one of the great advocates of mental of the expert. You are teaching mental of the expert to people around m- many countries, including us in India with the online school of drama. Um, and sometimes one feels like, hey, David, what do you have to say? You are quoting everything from Dorothy, but what do you have to say? How did it happen that you you realize that Dorothy has so much even to reach to that point, reach to those levels or depth is a long way to go. When did you realize that she is the one, her work is the one, her insights are the things you have to hold on to?
Okay, well, when I was doing the postgraduate course, this, as I said, was when I first encountered Dorothy's work. And the course was taught by Dave Davis in Birmingham. And we went and spent 2 days, I think, with Dorothy in Newcastle, and she was still teaching there at that time. And she did a drama with us. She worked with us as she would do with a group of children. And she started by asking us what we would like to do a play about. And we chose to do a play about witches. That was the chosen
Hmm.
subject. And it was a very powerful drama, a very powerful experience for all of us who took part in it. Unforgettable. And I was already immersed in Dorothy's work through the course we'd been doing. But that was really such a memorable event in my life. And then for a time, I was teaching in schools as a drama teacher. And then I went to do my PhD. I was teaching in university for a time. For 10 years, I was at the University of Wolverhampton. And in that time, I met Yona Towler Evans. Now, when I trained with Dave Davis, the focus was very much on, we might call it process drama. This was how Dorothy worked in the early years. The phrase that she used, in fact, was man in a mess or gut level drama. These were the terms that tended to be associated with her work. And it was really later on in the 70s into the 80s that she was developing Mantle of the Expert. I didn't really encounter or learn much about Mantle of the Expert on the course with Dave Davis. It was when I started working with Yona, who at that time was a drama advisor in Dudley Council. And so I would work with her on projects. She would work with some of the students from the University of Wolverhampton. And that's how our connection began. And Yona at that time was one of the few people in the country, I think, who was using and developing Mantle of the Expert. And it was through working with
Yeah.
her and working with Dorothy, because Dorothy would help us on projects. We created a teacher's pack about a project, which we called What's in Store, which was all based on Dorothy's ideas and Dorothy's methods. And after I stopped working with teaching at Wolverhampton University and set up Midland Actors Theatre, I continued to do projects for schools based in Mantle of the Expert and going to Dorothy and getting her input and advice on how we should teach these projects. And so I was continuing to be immersed in Dorothy's work. For me, there was continuity. It never stopped. And we set up projects which were funded by Erasmus Plus, which is a European Union funded system for where you can have schools and creative organizations across Europe working together to develop teaching practice. And we did an Erasmus Plus project on Mantle of the Expert. We did one on the commission model of teaching, which is another of Dorothy's methods. We did one on rolling roll, again, one of Dorothy's methods. And in these projects, we were working with schools or teacher training institutions in Germany, Turkey, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and trying to help them to develop Mantle of the Expert and these other methods in their own contexts. So for me, Dorothy's work was always there, it never went away. Now, what happened in COVID was that I, at that time, set up the Facebook group, Commission Model of Teaching. And that was when I started to make contacts with people from around the world, people in India, people in Turkey, in Nepal, Thailand, China, all around the world, and generating interest and discovering as well that there are pioneers developing Dorothy's work in different parts of the world. I mean, one of the shocks to me, I think, at that time was I realized how far drama teaching in England, at least, had moved away from Dorothy. I don't know if people know the history, but in the 1980s, there was somebody called David Hornbrook who came in,
Yeah.
and he was very critical of Dorothy Heathcote and Gavin Bolton. And I think he didn't understand them at all. He got so much wrong about them and their work. And he caused great controversy at the time. I remember this myself. And he said, oh, well, if we're going to keep drama as a subject in schools, what we've got to do is can't be using it across the curriculum. We've got to set it up as a subject in its own right, where it's got its own curriculum, where people are learning about theatre and productions and plays and directing. And and I think really, in England at least, David Hornbrook won the argument, because that's what drama teaching became. And it was also driven by the fact that the national curriculum set up drama as a subject and very much based it on that idea of we're teaching about plays, we're teaching acting, we're teaching directing. Personally, I don't see any point in teaching young people to act or to be actors, because they're not being trained to be actors. Personally, I don't see a point in that. I follow Dorothy, that really we should be arguing for better education. That's what we should be arguing first of all. And drama is such a powerful means of changing education. I think what Dorothy was about really was about changing education. And my feeling was, when I was creating the Facebook group, when I was setting up the annual conference, the Dorothy Heathcote conference, for me, the whole thing really was to say to people, let's go back to Dorothy. Let's go back to what Dorothy said and what she was doing, because I don't think we've understood it. I don't think we've really scratched the surface, because what she was offering was so rich and so deep and such a revolution really in education, that I think we need to go back to her. And this is not, I'm sometimes people say, oh yes, he's a purist about Dorothy's work. It's not really about that. It's about, we need to look at what she was saying and take what we want from it. But unless we've gone to the source first of all, we won't really understand what she's doing and what she's saying. And she's on a higher level than the rest of us. You know, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say, and she was a giant. So it's been my joy, really, over the last 5, 6, 7 years to be diving into the archive, because I have this relationship with, we're hoping to develop Dorothy's archive, looking at materials, creating for the Facebook posts every day. It's like a thought for the day, Dorothy's thought for the day. And it really is a case for me of, okay, I am finding something, a point of something that she said. And I am really the person who's learning most from this whole process of really looking and interrogating what she was saying and learning from it. So I guess it's really been, everything has accelerated in the last few years since that moment in COVID, when I decided to set up this Facebook group and then followed on with the conferences and so on, that it's been not simply my immersion in Mantle and Dorothy's work, but it's also been working more and more with people like yourself and with students and teachers from around the world. And that's really when as I say, I feel like every day Dorothy's teaching me something new.
Yes, you are running that group quite religiously. One can see that there is a lot of material coming almost every day. That's so very, I mean, meaningful and quite exciting and quite thoughtful, actually. So, I have got some photographs of your work, but before we go to that, um, yes, you talked about David Hornbrook, who advocates drama performance, and I think his book, one of his books was Education in Drama. He was talking about drama itself is education. And but you were now coming back. I have two questions before we go to some of the photographs we have. First thing is creativity. Um, in England, we had creativity guru like Ken Robinson and developed a lot of material, his books, his researches, his documents. And he's the one who was known outside England for his famous speech, school skill creativity. In spite of all these efforts, creativity was quite squeezed. What happened actually? The rest of the world was learning from England and from Ken Robinson. The crazy creativity is one of the core things of education. When you begin with children, it's literacy, it is numeracy, and then uh, I say creacy, but yes, creativity, he said, is equally important. But then where did it go? We are not, we have squeezed all arts. So what is happening actually? Have they forgotten Ken Robinson? Have those all documents dumped somewhere? Nobody talking about that. Yes.
There was, in the early 2000s, there was quite a lot of money put by the government, by the Arts Council, into creativity in schools. There was a whole scheme of work called creative partnerships.
Yeah.
The idea was that artists and theatre companies and different arts forms would be introduced to schools, and practitioners like myself were brought into schools to develop um, more creative ways of working. So the Labour government at that time put a lot of emphasis on that and a lot of money into that. And yes, I was very involved with that. I was worked with a number of schools who were funded through this program, and these schools chose to develop Mantle of the Expert. And then you have these swings in education. So the swing moved against creativity. I mean, it was really the Conservative government came in, and there was a very narrow focus that they had in the curriculum. They wanted it. They were the. It moves away from creativity back to what I would call the Thomas Gradgrind school of education. Thomas Gradgrind is a character in Dickens' Hard Times. I think it's him, this character who says, "We want teach them facts. We want to learn them facts," he says, or something like that. It's all about facts, and that's what happened with the Conservative government. There was all this emphasis on knowledge, on facts, on a crowded, crammed curriculum. I don't want to say it's only the Conservative government, because I think it's also, you can see this in terms of neoliberal agenda for education. So it's happening wider. It's not just about Britain. You can see it in other parts of the world as well. This narrowing of the way of teaching, narrowing of the curriculum, hardening of it. And my hope is that things will swing away from that. It is actually disheartening for me, though, when you see what happens is this, with a scheme like Creative Partnerships, you have this enormous investment in trying to develop something. And then a new government comes in and it's all gone. They just don't want anything to do with it anymore. And all the benefits of that are lost. And the money that was spent on it is lost. And teachers get buffeted by the latest scheme. Okay, they can't do this anymore. They've got to do it this way. And they have to go with the flow because that's what's being demanded of them. And so, yes, since that time, for the last 15 years or more, creativity has been squeezed out. But my hope is not just that we will see another swing against that, but people just realize that way of working is not working. It's not producing what society needs. And it's not engaging young people. It's not interesting them because it's so knowledge and facts based, and that it's not developing their thinking powers. To me, a lot of Mantle of the Expert, this way of working, it's less to do with increasing knowledge, and it's to do with developing thinking powers, ways of thinking about the world. It's about knowledge in the sense of how do historians see the world, or how do scientists see the world. It's more about developing that way of thinking, because we can learn facts when we need them. And if we need facts, we can get them off the internet. But the way of thinking, the creative way of looking for knowledge, assembling knowledge, putting it together, that's what we need to develop in young people. They need to be able to collect the knowledge and put it together for themselves and use it and apply it. And just lots of facts. I think we all know from our own education experience, you learn things for an exam and then you forget them. In fact, you probably don't want ever to think about them ever again in your life. And that's not a useful way of thinking about education. So we hope to see a change again soon.
Yes, let's hope they understand the value of critical thinking and creative thinking. But David, in this age of technology, have you ever thought or brought into practice that how can we leverage technology to enhance or to bring in the joy and power of drama in schools or in any other setting without losing the liveliness and the collaborative nature of theater?
Yes, it's an issue because there were moves. There have been some books published about drama teaching needing to embrace new technology. John Carroll, who was a student of Dorothy Heathcote's and quite an important figure, and in terms of developing her ideas or applying her ideas, he was involved in a couple of books that have been published about this. But one of the things about drama, of course, is that it's about an interaction in a group. It's about a bonding in a group.
Yeah.
And I remember in one of these books, there's a story about a project that was developed, that was used with some young people, tried out with them, and they were asked what they thought of it. And some of them said, well, we don't really want to be working with computers and videos and so on in drama, because we do that all the time anyway. We want some different kind of experience. And there is that point that drama offers you a different experience than, because so many people nowadays, especially young people maybe, are so glued to their phones or screens the whole time. So drama can offer something different. But I think we need to be looking at how technology can be used. And one of the outputs that I'm looking for with the project we're doing this project at the moment, which is about Dorothy Heathcote's history and heritage work, and how that might be reinvented today, not copied, but how we might use it and apply it today. And one of the things I'm trying to do is look for how we can create materials that are put online that can be used not just by teachers, but might be used by young people, where it's materials which I suppose it's about reinventing some of Dorothy's conventions for drama in a technological form.
Yeah.
And really what that is about is when I look at things on the internet, a lot of it to me, including educational material, leaves the viewer passive. There's a lot of educational videos out there that sort of tell you, give you the information,
Yeah.
and you're just sitting there listening to it. And I'm looking at it and thinking, I want to create materials which do what Dorothy's conventions did, which was saying, okay, now here's the material for you to interrogate, for you to make sense of. So it has to have that openness to it. It's not simply telling you what you should know, but it's material that engages you and makes you want to sort it out, make sense of it. And so I think we have to be there. We have to be there in technology and using technology, but we also have to think about how that technology is used. And that's why I'm looking at the moment and interested in how we can reinvent some of Dorothy's conventions. She created conventions that could be used in the classroom, and I'm thinking about how can they be reinvented online in ways that don't leave people passive, but engage them actively in thinking and in interrogating materials. So, and of course, there's lots of questions that we don't have the answers to, such as using AI and so on. We're all faced with the question of how technology is going to develop and how it's going to change us. And we have to be thinking about these things.
Yeah. The question of AI comes next, actually. So this is time to have a look at some photographs and know from you a little more about those moments which are there. Meanwhile, I would like to say welcome to a few more people. Minakshi, Rajiv Lochan, Balbhim College, and Mohan Chauhan. And Vaishali is commenting a lot, and a few questions maybe will come to you later when we take some questions.
I'd like to say
And
hello to everyone who's there, and some of those
oh,
names, of course, I
yes,
know
they are also saying hello and hello
Charlie,
from,
Malachi, and so on. Hello, everyone.
yeah, and Bhatt Mahesh. All welcome. And let's have a look at the photographs and peep in the world of David's work. Here
Okay,
we
we go.
Here we go. Ah, the very first photographs. You have to tell me, ah, what is in the eyes of this young man? Are they looking around as a director or writer or what? Just recollect that ambience and those days and where were you, what position, what all were you doing on during those days?
You didn't. Are you going to show the whole picture, or is this you? Because this
No,
is part.
this is. I want to show only this. Maybe we see the whole
Yeah,
picture later, but
because what you're missing, because you asked me for a photo of me with Dorothy, and this is a photo of me with Dorothy, and this is
yes.
obviously a day when days when I had a beard and days when I had more hair, and I was at a workshop that Dorothy was doing. I think it was in London at Goldsmiths. And when she saw me that day, she looked at me and she said, "Glutton for punishment," she said, because obviously I went to a lot of her events. And
Mhm.
then from that event, I remember that at that event, I heard her say, "If you think theatre in the classroom, you can't go far wrong." By which she meant not, okay, you're doing theatre as a performance, but you're thinking of the classroom as a theatre space and how you can transform it to create whatever situation that you need at that moment in the drama that you're doing. And that was one of the phrases that's really stuck with me. And I always try to think theatre in the classroom, in whatever we're doing. So I guess, but one of the things with Dorothy, um, she would think in a different way to you might expect, or the way that, I mean, a lot of the time, I think my reaction to Dorothy would be to think to myself, what are you doing, Dorothy? That's my question. I have this puzzling, what are you doing, Dorothy? Because I don't quite get it in a maybe to begin with. And so I'm always intrigued then to see, well, what is she trying to do there? What is the thinking that's going on there? And that's a really productive thing, really, to be looking at her and trying to work it out and trying to get behind it, to the thinking behind it. So probably in that picture, I'm thinking, what are you doing, Dorothy? And trying to make sense of it for myself.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So, what I want from you is to describe the moment and where was it? What is happening at the moment? Who are
This is
they?
in Turkey. This is in Turkey, a school in Turkey. This was a,
Oh,
um, I worked with some people, some wonderful teachers in schools in Turkey, Faria, Sevgi, over a number of years. We did Mantle the Expert with them. Later, we did commission model of teaching with them. When we started, they were working in this school. It was a school that specialized in plastics. I'd never known anything like that, certainly in England, that you have a school where it's very much technical based education, and particularly with a focus on plastics. And in the basement, they had machinery for producing plastics. In the
oh,
environment around the school, there was a lot of factories,
hmm.
many of them producing plastics. So it seemed like this was a school that was really set up to produce young people who would go on to work in these plastic factories. Um, but they were lovely young people. It was funny because they seemed to find me quite curious. I think it was something to do with the height and the look and the maybe the bald head, or I don't know. But they would follow me around and just gaze at me in some amazement because they hadn't seen anything like me before, possibly. But it was so we were developing. We were there to do some training days with other members of the Erasmus Plus project from different countries, and we worked some with some young people. I believe this project was about. There was a toy manufacturer whose designs had been for Christmas toys had been damaged in a fire, and he needed the help of some designers to produce designs that would sell for the Christmas market. And so they were
Hmm.
working in teams to produce their ideas, and then they fed back to the rest of the group.
Completely different photograph. School kids are involved. Is this part of some mental project or commission model or what?
This is a recent photo.
Hmm.
So the other one was, I don't know, 8 years old. This one is from a few weeks ago. So as I said earlier, that a lot of my work recently has been with a group in Worcester, or a group children from a couple of schools in Worcester. And
Okay.
this building is the Guildhall. The Guildhall is a fine old building. I think it dates back to Charles II. And
Okay.
we did a project there. I was doing a project for a couple of years, which was about for young people, which was about World War II, the Spitfire plane, but it was really about the impact of the war on ordinary people. And it culminated in an event at the Guildhall where the audience, the visitors, moved through the space and encountered in different locations young people dressed as if they were people from World War II. So some people
Mm.
were pilots. There were some people in fighter command. There was nurses. They even went down. Visitors went down into the basement where there were some prison cells, and they encountered German prisoners of war. And they went into another space where it was like an air raid shelter, and they encountered people. All of these people had their own stories. So the young people we worked with created their own stories based on research they did, and they told stories about the war. So it was, this is a way I like working now. I do a lot of work where I'm trying to use locations and have
Mm.
audiences moving through the location to different spaces and encountering um, different things in different spaces. And I do this with my theatre work, and I'm also doing it with young people. It was a lovely event. This is actually something following on from that with some of the same young people. We did a performance for VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, which was a couple of months ago. Um, and we based it on a poem. So we acted out the poem. And there was a moment where there were some photos in the Worcester Evening News of VE Day. When VE Day happened, you had photos of people on the streets, marching down the streets, celebrating, dancing, and we tried to recreate some of those moments as they were in 1945 when VE Day occurred and the people went out on the streets in Worcester. And we had the poem, and after the poem, we all sat down and we had a kind of street party because that was one of the things that people did on VE Day was have a street party.
Nice, lovely. So there is audience out there, right? Watching this.
Audience on the street, yes, watching this.
Yeah.
And
Same project going on?
that is the earlier event, well, about a year or so before this, where we took over the Guildhall, and as I say, the audience was moving through the space, and you can see people there dressed as evacuees, and dressed as nurses, and dressed as officers, pilots, fighter
Yeah.
command, and so on. So that was that event,
Yeah.
and the same event. We were quite
Uh,
lucky to be able to find costumes for that would fit these young people. But I think this has had a big impact on the young people themselves. I mean, it's quite what we were asking them to do was quite scary for them, I think, because you're not giving them a script. You're saying you're going to have to improvise in the moment, speak to people as if you are an officer in fighter command, as is happening here, or
mm,
as if you are a pilot. You've got to have that boldness to be able to do that and engage people in the moment and answer their questions. And I think it's exciting to see how they rose to that challenge because it is quite scary to begin with, I think, but it brought them out of themselves, a lot of them.
so what do you generally do when you are not lucky enough to get such costumes?
Well, sometimes you can get them made. You know, we do work with
Okay.
somebody who is a costume maker who's been working with me over many years, and she's great.
Mm.
And so sometimes we make our own. But this was a lot of
Ah,
costumes.
so this takes us to your productions and talk a little about you as a theater director. So
So it is,
this is a performance. I don't know the name of this performance. So tell us what performance it was.
this was called Descent, and this was a play that we
Descent.
developed.
Okay.
Descent.
Yeah.
This
Descent.
was a play that we
Descent.
developed over some years. Partly it was because we were going to perform it and then lockdown happened and we couldn't perform it. And we just performed it. We did the production just as lockdown was ending, really, and people were coming out of that.
So what just can you tell us the theme of the play in a line or two?
Yeah. So it was about characters who were one of the things that I like doing now, as I said, was I like to immerse people in an environment and get an audience to move through a space.
Hmm. Okay.
So this was actually, it was loosely based originally on Dante and the journey down into hell in the Divine Comedy. And so the idea was that these were characters who, all in their ways, were traumatized by war,
Okay.
and it was as if they were going down into the hell and then emerging at the end, having lived through this trauma and come out the other side.
Got it. Got it.
Now,
It
I
was
didn't
written
want
by.
David Calcutt and Sarah Sayeed. I didn't want the audience to just sit back and
Mhm.
watch the play. I got, at a certain point, as a director or as a theatre goer, I got bored of sitting in an
Yeah.
audience and watching a play and then going out
Okay.
at the interval and having a drink and going home at the end. I
Hmm.
wanted to have an audience experience going through this journey themselves. This is about characters going on a journey, an imaginative journey. And on the way, all sorts of strange things happen, including encounters with the goddess of the earth in the center of the earth. Now, this is all, you can see it all in terms of psychology, really, or Jungian psychology. You can see it as this as a psychological process, a psychological journey that's done in an imaginative form. But I wanted the audience to go on the journey. So we used to joke that the first 20 minutes or half an hour of this performance for the audience was a bit of a shock for them. It was a bit traumatic for them because I'm sure that for a lot of them, they were thinking, what is going on? Because they were sort of bombarded by the experiences that they were going through. And then it started to make sense for them. And then they started to put it together and but it was, you could only have about 20 people at most in an audience at the time who were going through this. We took over an old factory in the jewelry quarter in Birmingham, and the audience moved through different kinds of space, different kinds of location. Like sometimes it was through a narrow tunnel, and then it was through they were sitting in like a cramped cell, and so everything was not just about. And I was talking to the writers and saying, I don't want lots of words. One of the things I kept saying to the writers was, cut the words, cut the words. I wanted something more cinematic because I said, as soon as you've got characters saying things, the audience is just sitting listening to it. And I want the audience to experience it more in terms of space and sound and light and images rather than through words. And for writers, that can be actually a shift to ask them to do that rather than think, because playwrights at least tend to think in terms of words and dialogue rather than sound, image, movement, object, and so on. So it was
Oh,
a
it
great experience.
seems.
It was
Yeah.
I was very pleased with this, and we're working on a new play at the moment with, well, David Calcutt and a couple of other writers and a dancer and choreographer and musician, and we're trying to create something that's a bit similar, a sequel, if you like.
Yeah. David Calcutt seems to get a good idea of what you exactly want. That is why he has written many plays
Yeah, we've
with you, I
collaborated
think.
together. This is from Descent as well, but David Calcutt and I have collaborated over many years. In fact, when
Yeah.
I set up Midland Actors Theatre, it was the first. I commissioned him to write an adaptation of D.H. Lawrence's book Lady Chatterley's Lover, which we took to the
Yeah.
Edinburgh Festival, and it got quite a lot of publicity largely because of the notoriety of Lady Chatterley's lover. And it was featured in newspapers like the Sunday Mirror, which is one of our tabloids, who described it as the sexiest version of Lady Chatterley's lover ever. Well, they didn't see the production, they didn't know anything about it, but they just said that because it made a good headline, I think, and drew the reader's attention. So yes, I've been working with David over many years now.
So
This was a
is this the part? This is from Descent on again?
this is from Descent, and you can see this is part of the sort of craziness of
Yeah.
Descent.
Oh,
The
what is the
children.
theme? What was the theme of this play?
This is Edward Bond, and we did two tours of this, and it's quite a dark play. It's a play where you would go into a school at the start of the week, and over the course of the whole week, you would rehearse the play with a group of young people. We had two professional actors, and you'd have a group of about 16 young people in the cast, and you'd rehearse with them. And we'd break it down bit by bit. So it would be a case of, okay, now this happens, and then when that has happened, this happens. And they would improvise the dialogue. So they didn't have to learn lines, but they just had to get this sense of what happens here and now what happens here. And then by the end of the week, they could perform the play. And it was a play which, as I said, Edward Bond was very controversial. His plays include some violent scenes. This
Mm.
play contained its own violent scenes, but the children we worked with, I think some people might look at it and say, well, you shouldn't be doing plays like that with young people, with that kind of theme, with that kind of drama happening in it. But the young people who performed in it, they loved it. They thought it was amazing as a play. The word they often used was sick. I don't know if this is, this, Shuba, but I don't know if it's still used in this way, but for a time, certainly young people in England, when they said sick, oh, it's sick, they meant, oh, it's great, oh, it's really good. So young people used to say,
Mm.
oh, that play, that's sick. It's sick, this is. But it was a great play to do. Edward Bond was an
Ah,
interesting man, waiting for Godot.
yeah, so this was one more play. Good. Will
This
not
was
ask for.
this was a production that I did in about 2002 or something. We took it to Edinburgh. We performed it on tour as well. And what happened was, well, I did it. Samuel Beckett left these notebooks where he set down all the moves because he directed Godot himself, and he set down all the moves. And I decided I
Yeah.
would try to follow what Samuel Beckett did, just to find out what Samuel Beckett was trying to do.
Mm.
So I directed it with these two actors. And then what happened was we were taking it to the Edinburgh Festival, and the actor who was playing Vladimir had to drop out for personal reasons. And it was short
Oh.
notice. And so the only solution we could think of was that I would play Vladimir because I knew the moves and I could learn the lines in time. And so I ended up playing Vladimir. I haven't done a lot of acting in my life, but Vladimir was a character that I loved playing. We did a couple of tours of it. I did it first with one actor playing Estragon and then another actor playing Estragon. And in life, I think this actor who played the second actor who played Estragon, he and I had a similar relationship off stage to the one that we had on stage. So there was quite a lot of spark, I think, between the two of us. And I think what we brought out was comedy in the play, because I think it is a wonderful play, but it is also meant to be very funny. It's based a lot of it on vaudeville comedy. And so for me, this was another memorable experience, was actually playing Vladimir. And as I said to you earlier, sometimes when I'm feeling overworked, there's a line that Vladimir has, which I like to think of. When Vladimir says in the play, he says, it's too much for one man. And I like to think of that in moments when I'm feeling tired.
Nice. So, let's go to next pick. Oh, this is from the play.
This is from another play. This is a David Calcutt play. This was based on a kind of Greek tragedy idea. It was called The Mothers. And again, it involved a couple of professional actors and a cast of young people. So we'd go into a school, we'd go into a college, we'd rehearse with them over a week, and we'd perform it at the end of the week. And it's a way I haven't worked for some years now, but it'd be nice to do it again, to try it again. I don't know if we could anymore because schools are very reluctant to let their students off timetable completely for a whole week. You would have a lot of teachers complaining, science teachers, math teachers, whatever, if you took them off timetable for a week, because they would think that what are we going to do? We can't cover, we've got to have this time with them to cover the curriculum that we've got to teach. So there's
Yeah.
much less space now in the curriculum than there used to be for this kind of project, this kind of work.
Yeah. So for waiting, in waiting for Goto, you had to play Vladimir, uh, just in case of emergency. But otherwise, you don't play yourself any roles.
I took it over, as I say, and then I stayed with it, and I love doing it. I did also once, early on as a company, we used to tour Macbeth to schools every year because it was on a set play. And we did actually 6 years tours of Macbeth. And in the end, we had a situation where the last tour, the actor who was cast as Macbeth, um, he was dyslexic and he wasn't able to learn his lines in time.
Okay.
And I had to
Then
take it
you,
over. Again, I had to play Macbeth. And I took it over because having toured it for 6 years, I knew the play. I could have played
yeah,
Lady Macbeth. I could have played any of the parts in it because I knew it
yeah.
so well. So I had to take that part over as well. This is from Tarkovsky's film Stalker, which, if you don't know, it's a film about characters who go into a sort of dead zone, go through a dead zone where strange things happen, and
Hmm.
you're not sure if it's in their minds or if there is real danger here or really strange forces at work here. It's one of my favorite films, and it was one of the influences on our production of Descent, because that was very much, again, it was, as I said, we set
Oh,
it
all
in
right.
history where you went through this old building. I mean, one thing we had in this factory was that we had there was a leaking roof, and one day before the performance, all this water was coming into the space because we had flooding, and we had to try and get rid of the water before the audience came in. And the the lighting guy set up a guttering system so that in future, if it rained, then the water would all go down this guttering and down into a drain in the building. And people thought that the sounds that they were hearing of water trickling through the guttering and down into the drain was a sound effect that we deliberately created, but it was there in the space, and that's part of the idea of this immersion in this ruined landscape in a way, which is exactly what you get in this film Stalker by Tarkovsky.
Hmm.
A
I
great
see.
director, very influential on me, really, Tarkovsky.
This is from Descent.
That's from Descent, yes. That's Alex Capilla, and that's one of our
That's
dancers. We had a dancer who represented this goddess that they encountered in the middle of the earth. So it was a mythical play. This is from the Living History project that we're doing at the moment. One of the things that we've been looking at is nursing, medicine, science in the 19th century. And I've
hmm.
created a project based around the story of Joseph Lister. Now, this is going back to Dorothy, who did a famous project about Joseph Lister, the man who pioneered antiseptic surgery. And
Oh,
one of the things that we did, one of the things that we're doing in this project is trying to work in heritage spaces, not just in schools, but to take young people into heritage spaces. And this was in the old operating theatre in London, which is 19th century operating theatre, one of those places where they used to perform operations and the audience was students, medical students, would be sitting around the sides watching the operation. And these are some students from the University College London, some trainee teachers who worked with me on this project. And here they are recreating a photo, not a photo, rather a painting of a operation from the 19th century. And I'm actually going to be next week, I'm going to be going back down to the old operating theatre again and doing another workshop in that space. I think it's one of the most exciting aspects of this project is doing things in these heritage sites, because we're working also very closely with Black Country Living Museum and working with some students and some young people and doing things in that location as well.
So this was part of Mentor of the Expert project?
Yes, it was a Mantle project. We only had a couple of sessions. We had one session in a school, and then we had this session in the old operating theatre, where young people were looking at exactly how Lister performed his operations and what the difference was, why he was, first of all, what his thinking was, how he came to develop his ideas about antiseptic surgery, and then how he applied it in practice. So this was very much how he, this scene I think is from a, based on a painting. They were asked to recreate a painting which shows how terrible operations were before Lister came along, because there was a painting, a famous painting of an operation in America where there's blood on all the surgeons' hands and blood on their clothes, and there's no idea whatsoever of antiseptic surgery. And this is the kind of outfit that they all wore in those days. They all wore these jackets, like suits, like, and they were stained with blood. They didn't realize anything. And one of the things that amazed me about this project really is so much that we take for granted now. You realize that it wasn't so long ago that people didn't understand about germs. They didn't
Yeah.
believe. It was Pasteur and it was Lister then who said the problem is germs. And people said, what are germs? They're just imaginary. We can't see them. How do you know they're there? And yet we take it for granted now. So it's a really, part of it was about how things change, how our understanding changes, how there are these moments when things shift. And then we look back and we don't know how it was ever any different.
So were you using still images, these tableaus only, or there was some action in between? Action and dialogues were there also? Some
Yeah,
interactions
just
were there also?
one of the tasks was to create this
Yeah,
moment from this painting, and
yeah.
then also to create a moment from a picture of Joseph Lister at work, and to note the differences and what Lister was doing. And then they also, working with these young people from a school, they also tried to create moments of how Lister performed his operation, because I put together some descriptions of exactly what he did, and he was minute in particular about how the operation should be performed. So they had to look at it as if really they were trainee doctors themselves in that time, trying to apply Lister's methods. And in the end, they did a sort of performance themselves of reenacting what an operation was like when Lister did it. Because this space, although Lister didn't work in this space, he would work in very much like this space. And I mean,
Okay.
Lister was an amazing man, really, because I went to look at some of his materials in the archive at the Royal College of Surgeons. And when he was giving lectures, he created these amazing visual materials as teaching aids. He wasn't just a pioneer scientist, he was an educator as well. He created charts to teach students about antiseptics. Some of them were huge, like 10 meters long. We don't know how he used them exactly when he was teaching, but he was, one of the things I enjoy, I think, is just taking a subject like this and then becoming immersed in it. Because to begin with, I knew nothing about Joseph Lister whatsoever. And now I know quite a lot about him.
Yeah.
This is
Ah,
again in Turkey. This is with the school, with these young people, these wonderful young people we were working with in this secondary school, this school for plastics in Germany.
So what was the commission, if I may ask?
It was, I think it was, as I say, this idea of this creating toy designs.
Okay. Same
And
from the
that's
same
them.
project?
That's them making a presentation of their ideas at the
Oh,
end.
okay.
Ah, now
This
I'm jumping
some
around quite a lot here. So why did I ask you to feature this picture? So one of the things that I'm quite interested in, I've written quite a lot about the idea of what you'd call the simulacrum. So Disney theme parks, I've written quite a lot about Disney theme parks. I became very interested at a certain point in Disney theme parks, and I've written quite a lot about them. And I became fascinated by the way that Disney theme parks tell their stories to visitors, because that is all about moving through a space and encountering a story, but not through dialogue, but through objects, through sound, through environment. They're actually very clever, these Disney Imagineers. And I've done Mantle of the Expert projects where I've asked young people to think of themselves as Disney Imagineers, planning theme park rides and having to think of telling a story not through dialogue, but through environment and objects and sounds and temperature and light and so on. And when I discovered that that's what the Disney Imagineers did, it kind of blew my mind. And that, in fact, has influenced my own work. It's influenced something like Descent. You know, I said to you that I was
yeah,
telling the writers, don't use
yeah,
words so much.
yeah.
And as part of this, I became intrigued by this. This is the Thomas Moulton Barn in America. And this is known as the most photographed barn in America.
Okay.
And every morning and every evening at that twilight hour, which Hollywood calls the golden hour, photographers meet, come to this place to take a photo of this barn. And you can check it out. You'll find there are thousands of images of this barn on the internet. And the reason why, well, I just became intrigued at why does this barn get photographed so much? And it's to do with the location. It's to do with the fact that the shape of the roof is mirrored by the mountains behind it. And I became
Yeah.
intrigued by this whole business, and I started to look into nature photography, the whole tradition of that, the idea of nature that comes through the work of photographers like Ansel Adams. And so with Agatha Handley, I call her Agatha Allen because she is my wife as well. We've written a number of things
Okay.
together, and she and I wrote about this. In fact, I gave a presentation about this at a conference, and she came and talked to me about it afterwards. This was in Poland, and that's how we first met. So the you could say what brought us together was the most photographed barn in America.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. What
Ah,
is this?
this is a Disney theme park ride. This is Expedition Everest in the Animal Kingdom in Disney World in Florida. And I've never been, but this is an example of what is called in Disney Imagineering narrative placemaking, where you tell a story through the objects. You take the visitors on a journey through the environment, and it's the signs in the locations that tell the story. And this was the one that really blew my mind when I looked at it. I've written with Agatha, she and I have written an article about this ride, which is going to be published soon in the Journal of Disney Studies. And it's fascinating to me. It's all the work of a man called Joe Roday, who was a Disney Imagineer. But when you think of it, there is a link with Dorothy's work, because so much of Dorothy's work was about the as the use of sign, as she called it.
Yeah.
It's about sign of all the time in life we're reading signs around us.
Yeah.
We're reading what someone wears, how they speak, um, what kind of socks they wear. These are all signs that tell us something about them. Or there are signs in the environment that tell us where we are and what's going on. And it's what is happening in the Disney theme park ride is the selective use of sign. They are
Yeah.
selecting sign to tell a story. This happens in the theater because in theater, you're selecting sign. If you put a character in a red dress, then
Hmm.
it's saying something about that character to the audience, whether they know it or not. It's saying something to them. And one of the things that Dorothy was doing was harnessing that power of the selective use of sign for the classroom, so that sign became, as she would say, significant. Everything became
Yeah.
significant, something for us to look at, examine, and make sense of, because it held meaning. And it didn't just tell us what we should think, we had to look at it and make sense of it for ourselves. And this ride in, I mean, it tells an amazing story through the use of sign. It's every little detail can tell a story, and I love that.
Very interesting. Oh,
So this is
Cecily.
me. This is me. This is one of
Yeah.
the Dorothy Heathcote Now conferences. This was in Aberdeen. This is me talking to Cecily O'Neill, who is a lovely lady and great drama practitioner, very
Yeah.
influential. You, Dorothy,
Yeah.
worked with her closely, and we've been very lucky to have Cecily at all of the conferences, giving workshops. She's she's one of the gods of the drama world, and it's wonderful to watch her work, really, because the way she works is it's an amazing thing, really, how she works, because she has certain ideas for the start of a workshop, but then she really is open to what comes from the group and to thinking and changing things in the moment. And sometimes you're watching her and you think, well, yeah, she's not quite sure where she's going at the moment, but then she finds it. She comes back to us and she finds her way. She's really creative in that sense. She's not going by a rigid plan. It's evolving as she works on it, and she creates this magic in the end. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really happy to have been able to work so much with Cecily.
Oh, so here we come uh, to see the cover of your one of your books, Performing Chekhov. And so before we talk about the book, let me ask you about your productions uh, and something more beyond around your productions. So what is the scene? I mean, is theater as welcome as it was 15 or 20 years back? Why are people doing theater who are doing, I mean, seeing all the screens becoming part of our life? Um, and what still motivates them to do theater? So, in context of your productions, what drives you to make another production?
I think it's because I'm interested, as I've said, in immersive experiences and in taking an audience on a journey. And in our theatre plays, we do work with myth. As you know, I've talked about this story of a descent into hell and an encounter with a goddess, which you can see in psychological terms, but it's also you can see it in mythical terms. So we're working really with Jungian ideas about myth. Now, I don't know. I'm interested in Jung. I don't
Hmm.
know if Jung makes any sense in terms of human psychology, because I'm not a psychologist, and I don't really care if he does or not, because to me it's important in terms of understanding literature and art. And so it's interest in those ideas and applying those ideas to theatre in terms of the way we work. That's what keeps me going. I don't. Um, I don't actually. I'm Shuba. I don't know if I should be confessing this, but I don't go to the theatre very much.
Ah,
Uh, I like cinema more, I think, as an experience. And it's why I want to create different kinds of experiences. As I say, I got a bit bored of sitting in an audience and just watching a play. And I don't want to hear plays with dialogues. I want to reinvent theatre to be more like cinema, I suppose, a cinema type of experience, which is why I've talked about Tarkovsky and the influence of that on the production of Descent. It's trying to think more cinematically. And in a way, you can say that the Disney rides are like that. They are like they're putting you in a film. They're putting you inside a film-like experience. It's like you are the camera looking around as you're moving through a space. And so that's what I'm really interested in trying to break down and develop something different.
so, Midlands Actors Theatre. Um, it was established in 2001 or
Yeah, well, we were doing things from about 1999 onwards.
all right.
It was I was teaching at Wolverhampton University, and I. This is a long conversation we're having today. I hope people are still watching and not bored. But I
Yeah, you
was,
can tell me in brief, yes, how did it come into
yeah, well,
existence?
I was teaching at Wolverhampton University, and I set up the company to do occasional projects. Was the idea to take things to Edinburgh to do my own thing, and we started doing more and more. We started doing um, this tour of Macbeth every year, and I started to realize that I was doing two jobs. I was doing my university job, but I was also doing Midland Actors Theatre, and I felt at a certain time I had to make a choice. Which do I want to do? Do I want to carry on with my university job, or do I want to do the company? And I decided to do the company and left the university world. And really, it was now Midland Actors Theatre became that space where I could do what I wanted to do. That was formally, it was became a company, and I left my university job in 2001. So I've been doing it ever since. So I've been lucky to do my own thing and exactly what I want for the last 24
Hmm.
years.
All right. So, how do you choose actors? How they become part of Midland Actors Theatre? And more importantly, um, how does MAT survive? I mean, how you actors are paid good, or how do you do? Or they become voluntary basis? Some of them are paid, and what?
Well, yes, we pay the actors and we pay them equity rates, which is the union rates. And we find them, well, we tend to work with local actors and we tend to work with the actors, the same actors quite a lot because those actors are often involved with the process of rehearsing, developing ideas in the first place. With Descent, we improvised a lot of scenes with actors, and then the writers created the scenes based on that. So the actors who performed the play in the end were also part of the whole process of developing the script, the ideas for the script. So we have a kind of core or network of actors that we tend to work with over different projects. And we also do, however, sometimes do community projects where we're working with volunteers from the community. And we've done some tours on that basis. And sometimes we've been working with people who maybe have certain mental health issues. But it's not about, for me, it's not about therapy for them, because we're not therapists. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trying to see them as people who I'm helping. They're just part of a group, and we're doing a play. We're doing a play that we're going to tour. It might be on mental health themes, because we did do that. We toured a play called The Ward, which was an adaptation of a Chekhov short story about a mental health hospital in Russia at the turn of the 19th, 20th century. But to me, it was just about working with people to do a play. And I think, yes, some people came in and worked with us who had some mental health issues, but I think they appreciated the fact that we were simply treating them as actors, as people putting on a show together. And I think for a lot of them, it was very beneficial, gave them confidence, gave them a new start, but simply because we were not making an issue of any, I didn't know if they had problems or what their problems might be. We weren't talking about their problems. We were just doing a show with them. And so, yeah, we do some of that from time to time.
Hmm. I'm taking you back to a few more picks, and we were
Okay.
here on this pick, performing Chekhov. Yes, so I will be taking Vaishali's question soon. Vaishali has a couple of questions here. Performing Chekhov. Yeah, as you have told us the story of you visiting Moscow, doing your research work, but doing less of your research work and seeing other things more. And I think it was then that the idea of writing this emerged, or
I
what
was
happened?
I was writing my PhD, which was, as I say, it was about Chekhov on the British stage. But my
Okay.
supervisor thought that I should learn Russian and I should
Hmm.
go to Moscow. And at that time, you could get a grant from the British
Okay.
Academy to go to study in Moscow. I had a grant. I was there for 5 months. I was supposed to be doing research in libraries, but as I say, I didn't. But I did go to the theatre a lot, and I did learn some Russian, and I saw quite a lot of Chekhov in Russia. But the thesis was about Chekhov in England and about British
Okay.
productions. Um, I was lucky. I interviewed a lot of directors. I worked quite a lot with a director called Mike Alfreds, who directed several Chekhov productions, and I watched rehearsals for that. And when it came to, once I'd finished the PhD, I sent it to Routledge, and they said, well, yes, we'd like to publish it, but we want you to write not just about English productions, we want you to write about American productions and Russian productions. So I had to quickly do research on some American productions and talk about some Russian productions as well. I mean, I knew a production by Yuri Lubimov, who was a Russian director, his Three Sisters. I think I also looked at Lee Strasberg's production of Three Sisters. And so, obviously, for the publisher, they wanted to make sure that it could be sold in different markets, apart from just a British interest. So that's why they wanted me to expand it to look at other productions around the world. It's been translated into Japanese, and
Yeah.
although there's no Japanese productions in it.
So much of the content of this book comes from your own research work, right?
Yeah, it's about different productions and different ways of thinking about Chekhov and how people have reacted to Chekhov and to and
Can
how
you
they've
tell us? Yeah,
go
yeah,
on, yeah.
please. Yes. Yeah, yeah, please complete.
Well, so people to begin with didn't think they were plays, so I had to get my head around that. Why didn't they think these are plays? He was writing in a very different way. But then suddenly in England, people adopted him as kind of as if he was an English author, and he became very sort of very much loved.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in fact, then if people came along and they did productions which tried to change the way we thought about Chekhov and the way we looked at Chekhov, then often people would react against that and not be happy about these directors coming in and doing something outside what was expected of Chekhov. I think there's a danger that Chekhov is done in quite a sort of lyrical and sad way, or elegiac way. And in fact, he was quite a sharp-eyed comedian, writer of comedy. He was very sharp about human foibles. And also, I think in this book, I was trying to say we shouldn't say this is how Chekhov should be done. We should be open to seeing how he might be played with in terms of theatre. So it's always really about how the shock of the new. It was when Chekhov was first performed, there was a shock of the new, and then we expect certain types of productions. I suppose we become comfortable with that, and yet some people, sometimes directors, come along and they shock us again and make us look at these plays in a new way again.
Hmm. So the on the cover, this pic is of a performance in England or what? And which story, which play is this?
This is the seagull. This was I wasn't very
Okay,
happy with the publisher about this picture. This is a picture from an American production, and I thought it was a
okay.
rather dull picture. And I said, well, there's other pictures we've got that are much more lively and interesting than this, but they wanted this one. I think because it was an American production and they were looking for the American market, I suppose, because I think that's
Okay.
the biggest market for books is in America, I think, academic books
Hmm.
anyway.
All right. So we have your another book, Stanislavski for beginners. And both Chekhov and Stanislavski are very, very well known or popular figures in literature, in theater. So, what do you aim in this book? And I mean, the people, the theater makers, though, and especially those who are interested in acting, is this good? Is this a good book for them to understand Stanislavski? You mean?
Well, so this is in the series of books which are for beginners. It's I think it started
Oh,
with Marx for beginners, and they're comic books, they're graphic books. They
yeah.
try to make ideas, philosophical ideas, accessible. And I was teaching at Wolverhampton University, and I had this moment I remember vividly when I was actually at home, sitting on the floor, and I was thinking to myself, I wish they would publish a book called Stanislavski for Beginners. That would be very useful. And then I thought, well, I could write that. So that's how the idea was born. And
Yeah.
really, it's a book that I'm very pleased with. I'm very happy with because I think it's not just making Stanislavski accessible. I did a lot of research, and I think Stanislavski tends to be misunderstood. You still
Hmm.
find students at school writing or saying, "Oh, Stanislavski was about naturalism." You still find books saying he was about naturalism in the theatre, and he wasn't, because you look at some of his productions and there were nothing naturalistic about them at all. They were highly stylized. But what it was about it was about belief and truth in acting, and this can happen in any style. It's not just in naturalism. So I was trying in this book to change people's idea about what Stanislavski is about, and also to see that his ideas about acting, his acting methods, changed significantly with time. And we tend to associate him most with his early productions of Chekhov. When he was doing his productions of Chekhov, which Chekhov didn't like very much, he was not he hadn't developed his system at all. He only started developing his acting system in like 1905, 1906, after Chekhov had died. And it went through different phases and ended up with something he called the method of physical actions, where it's really about you do something and then you find your truth in the moment of doing the action. And so it was trying to give that sense of how his ideas changed with time. And the other thing about this book is that the artist that I worked with, Jeff Farrow, he decided that he would do little pictures of me in the background of some of the pictures. So if you go through this book, you will see me in the background. It was kind of like, Hitchcock appears in his films in the background. He decided to put me in it. So I used to say to
Okay.
my students, it's a bit like that book, Where's Wally? Where you look at these pictures and you're trying to find Wally in the picture. You can go through this book and try and find pictures of me in different poses, unexpectedly cropping up in productions of the Moscow Art Theatre. So there's a kind of fun element about the book as well.
So is my copy of this book is ready with your signature?
Of course it is, Shuba, yes.
Let me see. So let me ask the silly question because in this age, people are used to ask tips and tips. So, what is that one thing, one key thing that today's actor must take care of from this, from Stanislavski? I mean, you have studied Stanislavski. What is that one thing that they must work on? The actors or wannabe actors, you can say.
I think one of the great things, have been influenced by, as I say, this director, Mike Alfreds. And one of the things that Mike Alfreds did was he emphasized how every performance in the theatre has to be live. What he meant was he looked at theatre and said, what makes theatre different? And he came to the conclusion that it's a fact that it is live and it is happening in front of the audience now. And really, deadly theatre happens when it's not really happening in front of you, when you've got actors who have worked out what they do and they repeat it mechanically every night. And there's not any real interreaction going on between the actors in the moment. They're not really responding to each other because it's all been planned beforehand. And that becomes kind of deadly theatre. A lot of theatre is like that, I'm afraid. But it's really about, okay, you do your preparation so you know that you can be in the moment. And that thing for Stanislavski, it's about playing the objective. What do you want at that moment? And that can be done a different way each night. You're not necessarily going to do exactly the same thing. You could try to get your objective, achieve your objectively differently. One way, one night you might be talking in a more soft and persuasive way. The next night you might be more firm, and it will change. And if you change in the moment because you're in the moment as an actor, then the other person in the scene with you will react differently. And it will start to happen in that moment, in that live interaction between the actors. I think theatre can tend to sort of, actors and directors can tend to fix things. And you can see productions where they fix things and they repeat it the same way each night. And it is deadly. It's deadly theatre. So it's all that preparation is so you can be in the moment.
Be in the moment. Thank you for sharing that. And here is the cover of a book which I understand you like very much. It's by Alan Garner.
Alan
Alan
Garner.
Garner?
Alan
Alan
Garner.
Garner. And this is one book that you like to go back to often, or you like it very much. Why? What is in the book? What uh, brings you back to this book, and what is that stays in your mind from this book?
So Alan Garner is a very interesting writer, and he wrote books first of all, was known for sort of fantasy books for children, and has later on written much more sort of adult books. And this book, there was it's a part of a quartet, a series of 4 short books, the Stone Book Quartet, which has been taught in schools and could be read by children because it's the short stories, and the language is quite clear. But one of the things about Alan Garner's writing is that he's using words in a very sort of selective way, in a very precise way. He's sort of working at them. This book is the first book. It's about a stonemason. And I think there's something in the way Alan Garner thinks of language as a writer. He feels like he's carving the words. You feel that in the way he writes. And so this book, yes, could be read by children, but it's also a book that can be read by adults and enjoyed because each story is so precise and so well written. And there's just a scene in it that really stays with me. And it's a scene also that Dorothy talked about. And I think she might have done some work around it or planned to do some work around it because it's about a stonemason and it's about his daughter. And one day he takes his daughter to a cave. He sends her down a tunnel in the earth to a cave, which he can't go in because the gap is too small to get into this cave. But he said, I went there when I was a child, and everybody in our family goes there. And she goes into this cave, and what she sees there amazes her. So shall I read a little bit of it?
Yes, sure. Yes.
The end of the crack, the gap in the stone, was as broad as 2 stalls and as high as a barn. The Red Tough Tom, which is a name for some stone, was a curved island above its own water. The walls were white and pale yellow. There was no sound. The water did not drip. It sank through the stone unheard and seeped along the marl, which I think is a form of rock. Mary saw father's mason mark drawn on the wall. So this is the mark that he used to make on all the stonework that he did. He used to put his mason mark on it.
Okay.
It was faint and black as if drawn with soot. Next to it was an animal falling. It had nearly worn itself away, but it looked like a bull, a great shaggy bull. It was bigger than it seemed at first, and father's mark was on it, marking the mark a spear or an arrow. So she's gone into this cave, and she's found on it, on the wall, a painting of a bull. And this seems like it was like a prehistoric painting. And yet she's amazed because she sees her own father's mason's mark on this wall. And she also sees that she sees a hand, the mark of a hand painted on the wall. And so again, this is like a cave painting. And she puts her own hand on that hand painted on the wall, and she realizes that her hand fits the painted hand on the wall. And she also sees, when she moves the candle around this cave, that there are footprints all over the cave. It says there were footprints of people, bare and shod, the footprints of boots and shoes and clogs, heels, toes, shallow ones and deep ones, clear and sharp as if made together, trampling each other. Hundreds pressed in the clay, where only a dozen could stand. Mary was in a crowd that could never have been, thronging as real as she was, her feet made prints no fresher than theirs. So it's really about a moment where she connects with people through the ages, through the generations. She realizes that people have been coming into this cave over all these years. That's what all these footprints are about. And that her own father came here and saw this mason's mark, and he used that as his mason's mark. And so it's about things
Yeah.
passing on through the generations. The fact that she can put her hand on the wall and it fits the hand that's painted there gives her this sense of a connection, her life
Yeah.
connected with all of these ancestors going back so many generations, back it seems to primitive times. There's been this tradition of people coming here, this tradition in her family of people coming here and seeing this, witnessing this. And it's partly about passing on this skill of working with stone and painting and carving in stone that's been passed down the generations. So she sees her life in that broader cosmic context. And I think this is something that Dorothy would do as well in her work, was sometimes she would ask people to stand and speak as if they were a tree that had seen hundreds of
Yeah.
years go by. And it's another way of just saying, of trying to change our view of time, because we see time very much in terms of our present and our lives, but to see it in that wider context of time, I think is what Dorothy was trying to do sometimes, to give us that different view. And that's what Alan Garner does in that story. And that's why I love it. It's an amazing image, an amazing moment that really sticks with me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That is so deep. So, thank you, Iskan, for being there, and Louis, thank you for being there. And you are getting late. Yes, I can understand that. And this is time to take a couple of questions. I don't see any other question other than from Vaishali. She has been quite active and she has been commenting during our talk what she was liking, something like that. And her first question is, I want to read it for you. How can we develop the argument of drama becoming essential in the present context of AI slowly taking over mundane jobs? Yeah, so related questions. We discussed a little, but yes, in our own words.
Thank you, Vaishali. Um, well, I don't really know. I can't say that I have the answer to that. I mean, I think we have to say, argue first for drama as education and for changing the way we think about education. And we have to make that argument. It's not just about arguing for drama, it's about arguing for changing education. I mean, maybe AI might create conditions where we have to rethink education and what we're trying to do with it, because AI can be doing things that we've done in the past. So, what is our future going to be? Um, I don't know. I think it's a scary time because we don't know where this is going in terms of what impact AI will have. I mean, AI at the moment, anyway, although it's called artificial intelligence, I don't think it is really intelligent. It's a machine. It doesn't think. I mean, if you work with Chat GPT, you've got to be aware that you are more intelligent than the machine is, because you can think and the machine can't. It can only perform mechanical operations. If you ask it, ChatGPT, it will say that that's what it does. And so we have to be aware of and thinking in terms of our creativity and what we can do with AI that can encourage greater creativity in humans. If we let these machines do the work for us, if we let them do our thinking for us, then that is not a good future. But if we can see that, okay, they can do some things, but we can do some other things, we can be really creative in our thinking because we can think and machines can't. So that's what we have to be using. That's what drama methods are ideal for, really, because it's about creative thinking. That's all I can really suggest at this time.
Yeah, I realize this is the only question she has asked, and others she has made some comments. I would like to read one when we were talking about drama in education practices, where Shali has commented that only lazy teachers will put Dorothy's and Gavin's work down. Their work takes time and effort. That is what she has written. And things like
It
that.
does, because you can't do, there was a certain, I don't know if it's still the case, but sometimes teachers would think in terms of they they can do a training day in something and they've got it. That's another method that they can use. There's this phrase that people use sometimes. It's another tool in the teacher's toolbox. And so it's as if you can use this tool one day and this tool another day. And that's not really what this is about. It's not what Dorothy's work is about. It's not what Mantle the Expert is about. It's about continuing to work on yourself as a teacher. It's not only necessarily through this method, but to be using this method, I think that's the way you have to think of it. It's continually working on yourself as a practitioner and developing yourself. And that's why I say, I still every day think, oh, okay, yes, I understand that now. And I'm always trying to develop my own practice. It's the danger in thinking of teaching as like a technician where you can, I don't know, take a scheme of work off the internet and just teach it as if it can happen mechanically. It's happening in the space between you and the children in the moment. So every time you teach something, it's different or it should be different. That's what it's about. And that's why it's an art form and why you've got to keep working on it. So thank you, Vaishali. Yes, that's right.
People want to learn MOE in one day only. Learn it
Yeah.
as a tool and go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the way. Yeah. We are moving towards the end of this conversation, but I have many questions. I will ask only a few, selected few. I just want to know that what someone who is living in Britain or United Kingdom, youngster, what is the scope of drama and theater there as a career? How did they look at it? Is it attractive? Is it very vague? It is how is it?
I think it's always been difficult. If you want to be an actor, it's always hard in terms of employment. And I think there's a concern that there's fewer options for training now. And it's possibly going to become more of a something for an elite rather than for working class people, working class young people. Um, and also there was the impact of COVID that I've found that some of the young people that I work with, I'm talking about university level, there's more, oh, you see more issues in them in terms of confidence, in terms of how they deal with the world. There seem to be more mental health issues, or certainly they're more open at them. And that's partly the result of COVID. And COVID also meant, as I've said before, that maybe people had fewer chances for experiences of drama. Because one of the things that drama does, and any kind of drama work, not just Dorothy's work, but any kind of drama work, is it does make young people more outgoing and more confident in terms of public engagement and interactions. Because you notice this at university. You know, you see a lot of students in other subjects who tend to be very reserved, but the drama students tend to be not reserved. They're loud and they are articulate and they are, at least on the surface, more confident and outgoing. So it's not a good prospect at the moment in terms of the arts, in terms of employment, in terms of career opportunities in England. Um, as I say, I hope things change because of we're moving more towards a focus on creativity, perhaps. I mean, it's very expensive for people in England to go to university. They end up with huge debts. And so part of the mindset, I think, was for young people to think of, I've got to have a job when I finish and it's got to pay well so I can pay off these debts. And acting has always been a job that people do for love rather than money.
We all of us know it's more or less the same around the world. Mostly, I think that education system is exam driven, a lot of pressure and robotic methods, all that. So there is a gap. I mean, what more they should learn and what they are getting there because they have to pass tests and all. So how much parents are aware? Are they okay with this system? Or they are aware that something is missing, there is some gap. And if they are aware, what are they doing? Are they doing something outside school to fulfill this gap? Are you aware of this, David?
I think that I think parents can be thinking in terms of um, wanting to see their children achieve the grades, but I think there are parents as well who see that this is not enough. And you see this with the response of parents to Woodrow First School, for example. As I've said, that's a school where a lot of their teaching is done through Mantle, and the parents appreciate it. They can see that their children are benefiting not just from um, getting higher grades or developing their written work or whatever, but it's more holistic in terms of their development. And there's a caring culture that's built into the school. I think when parents experience that, then they appreciate that. I think in other schools, however, perhaps parents can stay within this mindset of it's got to be about the grades. And we do have this competitive system in England where schools are, parents are looking for schools where they get good results, they get good grades. They're thinking in terms of, oh, yes, my child, I want him to or her to have good grades to go on to get a good job and so on. We can only try to just hope, I guess, in future that things are less exam driven. I mean, the government in Britain has had a recent curriculum review, so maybe things will shift a bit, at least, away from this obsession with exams and results.
So, tell us in very brief that because recently I have seen you have announced a little details of Dorothy Heathcote conference. Dorothy Heathcote now, and what is uh, who is this for? The invitation. So let's, what do you aim to? And during these few years, now, how do you see it? I think it must have got evolved during this process. And from next conference 2025, how are you looking at it? What are you looking, what you have not been looking till last year?
So the conference lasts 4 days, and we have a day which is online, and then we have a day which is, we call it Creative Practices Training Day, where you come for a day and you work with trainers, tutors who introduce you maybe to Mantle of the Expert, ways of working in role or working across the curriculum. And then you see or even participate in a drama session in a school. So really that day is designed very much for people who want to find out more about this as a way of working. Because one of the things people say to us is, oh, Mantle of the Expert, you can hear about it, and maybe you think, I don't quite get it, but when you see it in practice, then you can understand it. Then you can say, oh, now I get it. This often happens. So that's a chance to see it in practice with people like Tim Taylor, Richard Kieran, myself, Roberta Buccini. That's on the Friday. And then there's 2-day conference weekend, which is very much practice-based. It's mostly about, it's not one of these academic conferences where you're hearing papers all the time. It's a practical conference where the idea is, and I've taken this from Dorothy, Dorothy wanted conferences to be about, we are all coming together to research something together, to explore something together. So every year we have a focus, which is a theme of the conference that we're all dedicated to exploring. And this year we've taken a quote from Dorothy, which is about how we need to think about not only what kind of schools we want, but what kind of society we want. And they have to go together. We have to rethink education and also see it in the broader context of what kind of society we want to see. And that brings in, or could bring in, questions like Vaishali's about AI. So it's a big question, but we're looking at it practically in practical sessions led by Cecily and Yona and Brian Edmiston and Bob Seldaslavs and people from around the world. Vaishali is going to be there. Vishaka Chakrabarti is going to be there. People from all over the world are going to be coming together. And it really does feel like we have a community of people who now have come together and share a dialogue and share an understanding. There's always new people coming as well and joining us. And so this year we're very excited that it's from November the 6th to the 9th, and it's going to be in Manchester Metropolitan University, where the Dorothy Heathcote Archive is housed. So people will also get a chance to look at the archive and some of the materials in there with, Dorothy's own materials. They all give signs, they all give clues to the way she worked.
That is an additional attraction, being in Manchester. Yeah. David, you have huge experience and you are still learning, a great sign of a great facilitator. You have worked in many countries. You are in touch with many practitioners all around the world. Tell me, have you learned something new in the field of drama in education that was not practiced in England, but that is being practiced somewhere else? Did you find something interesting, something from which you could add something to your work, or you are still to find that?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it's always interesting to see how different contexts work and the different demands on teachers. But there's also a lot of commonality, a lot of things that we share because we're all being driven by the same demands and the same constraints. I think what I see is pioneers around the world who are trying to change things. And in some contexts, you have to admire some people who are sort of struggling on their own and feel like they're not really supported by the system. But that's one of the things they appreciate of the seminars we have online and the events like the conference. It's a way of bringing together and sharing this dialogue and developing our practice together. So I can't think at the moment of an example of where I've seen something in another context or country that has really given me something new. But I'll think about that one. I'll think about that because I'm sure it's the case. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. And my last question, almost last question, will be about what are one of those few things that is part of your dream and they are still in pipeline and you have to do it for your satisfaction. What is your dream plan in a way, I can say?
I think I'm. I think I want to. Okay, I want to have an impact on education. Obviously, I want to try to change schools. I want to have an impact around the world. This might sound like very arrogant, but I think it's you can see it. You can see it happening. You know, I was talking to last week to people from Nepal who are interested in taking it on. There's people in Thailand, there's people in India, there's people around the world excited by this idea. And it's really about trying to spread the word as far as possible. But also I'm interested in trying to develop our understanding of Dorothy's work in a more academic way as well. I'm writing pieces with my wife Agatha about Dorothy's work, trying to sort of change how we think about education that way as well. Because I think we have to be working on all sorts of fronts, all sorts of different fronts. And that's why I also love working and doing the courses with you, of course, because
Yes,
we don't just have people from India, do we? We've had people from all around the world working with us
yes,
doing these courses.
yeah.
And I do also, as I say, I learn from them. I learn from teaching them.
Yeah, for that we are so thankful to you. It's so kind. It's so interesting. It's you are so open to you were so open to it, and it's going well. So about your dream plans, all the very best, and we will see a lot of it happening gradually, slowly, but it will happen. We wish so. Vaishali is still around, and she is repeating what she always says about that conference. That this is one of the best conferences. She is saying that again. Thank you, Vaishali, for being there for long, on and off though. And thank you everyone who was here, who came here, who commented, who said hello. We are very thankful to each and everyone for being here on this podcast, especially today. And we are thankful, we will be thankful to them who will come here again and see this recording. I am thanking to them also. And I would also request you to suggest any name that you think must come here on this platform to have a conversation like this, where we talk about arts and life with Shuba. Before we say bye bye to everyone, it is the host who has to say the last words. David, what else do you want to say? Maybe I have missed to ask something, but what is your feeling at the moment and what do you have to say?
Well, I'm very grateful to everyone who's given the time to this, and I know some of you by name, and I know you are these pioneers that I've been talking about. And I hope we've also intrigued some people to start to want to find out themselves about this kind of work. Because I think I do say to people who do our courses, I say, if you really take this on board, this will change you as a teacher because it will change the way you think about education and the way you think about children. And it's the beginning of a journey. But I think we can say that it's an exciting journey. So I hope you'll join us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, so begin with yourself. You start feeling the change, and other things will change also. Thank you very much, David. Thank you, all of
Thank
you
you.
who were here. Thank you, all of them who will be here. And those who will watch recording in coming days, they are also welcome to comment. We will read them. I will send all the comments to David. He can himself say this. So, David, thank you again. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Namaste. Good
Namaste.
night.